Hello. Good morning. We're live today from Green Realty México live talk show. We're doing a transmission from Starbucks here at Riviera, Nayarit. Today we'll talk in English because we have a very important guest for our show. We're going to talk about mortgages for foreigner clients that want to buy properties here in Mexico. So welcome back to our Green Realty Talks, live talks show. Remember to follow us at greenrealtymexico.com, Instagram, and as well Facebook. Good morning to all. Today we have a special guest. I'm going to give some information about our guest. I'm going to read his intro. He's the company of the mortgage we're going to interview today is Cross Border Investment. This company was founded by his president, Joshua Rappaport, originally from Toronto, Canada. He has been living here in Puerto, Vallarta since 2003. Joshua was literally fresh out of university when he decided to make this piece of paradise home. He finished his degree at the University of Toronto, and then he moved to Guadalajara. And then from Guadalajara, he moved to Puerto Vallarta. But well, let me give you this introduction and introduce you to Josh Rappaport. Welcome, Josh. Good morning. How are you, Josh?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Great, thank you. Welcome to Green Realty Live Talks show. This is the first one we're doing in English, so we're a little bit nervous. But we as you can see, we have some technical issues at the beginning. But sorry for the delay. But we're here. Welcome, Josh. Talk about yourself a little bit. Let us know your experience in mortgages in the real estate market in Puerto Vallarta.
Okay, thank you very much, Nacho, and thank you to the Green team for the invitation to participate in your live talks. This is pretty exciting. So a bit about me. I am originally from Toronto, Canada. I moved to Mexico when I was 23 years old. I did an exchange program with the university I was going to in Canada and the University of Guadalajara. And I just decided to travel around Mexico. And then 17 years later, and my whole adult life has been in Mexico. And in terms of specifically about the mortgages, I started working in the mortgage industry in Puerto Vallarta. I worked for a company here. I started working for them in 2006. And then in 2011, so I worked for them for about 4.5 years. I opened up my own company and started providing different type of services. In the sense that, my company provides mortgages for foreigners and Mexican nationals who purchase properties anywhere in Mexico. We do transactions all over Mexico. Obviously, because we're headquartered here in Vallarta, this is probably our strongest market right now, but we do closings regularly throughout the country in general. So yeah, I've been doing this for 14 years, and I've had the company now. Actually, November is our anniversary month. So in the month of November, my company has completed 9 years.
Very fast. I remember when you started this business long time ago, Josh.
And I know. I remember when you used to work at the agency before you opened your agency. So
yes, exactly. Congratulations. And we always partner with your company as well, because for us, as you know, for foreigners buying property here, sometimes it's a little bit challenge. They don't understand they don't understand the laws. They don't understand the process, all the notary process. So it's always good to have a partner that knows the way they think, the clients that are out of Mexico, how they think, how they process all the information, and to have a company based here in Puerto Vallarta as your company that could help us out with these type of transactions. So this type of shows, Josh, basically we work out some questions that some of our clients or some of the people that are watching us live right now are asking us. So we normally go during this process for a couple of questions to our guests. So we're gonna start with some questions, Josh, that we'll like you to help us out. The first one is a very important question about how is for cross-border investment, how this year been give us a little bit of feedback of this year, because it has been a weird year for all of us, So
Right.
have your operation has increased, decreased? Have your market has grown? Can you give us a little bit of feedback of this year specifically?
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, when the shutdown happened in Vallarta and most of Mexico, it was in like March, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it was a scary time for all of us because I think, I felt like the world was ending, so, I mean, and I mean, a lot of clients, I mean, I remember we'd do follow-up with clients, maybe clients who contacted us a month prior and then never responded to the information we had sent them. And we'd follow up with them and just be like, hey, client, we want to confirm that you received the information. And they would like come back and be like, how are you contacting us? There's a pandemic, the world's coming to an end and stuff. And we're just, the people in my office were just trying to do their job. So, and, in the springtime, so, between March, April, and May, I mean, there was a lot of transactions that were already in the pipeline, as they say, that were already, in part of the process. So, I mean, those had to keep going. Right. People had money involved already. People had signed sales contracts. And so those ones had to keep going. And, it kind of died down for maybe only like 2 weeks in terms of, lead generation, what we call like new clients contacting us. It never went dead, but it slowed down compared to the year prior. And then after that, it just kind of like picked right back up. So, I mean, we're still doing like home office. Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie. At my office, we're like a really tight group of people, and we like the ambience of working together or being in the same space together. So we did home office for like the shortest amount of time, like for the time that was required by the government. Some offices decided to shut down longer. We just did it exactly from like day one until the last day that was required. So yeah, we didn't. I mean, it didn't shut down that much, and clients kept showing interest, and there was a time like April, May, where lots of people were asking questions and wanting information, but weren't necessarily moving forward yet. But all of a sudden, things just started loosening up again in terms of quarantine regulations, and the floodgates opened basically. So I kind of feel like, I mean, being the director of the company, we've already started working on our closing of 2020. And it looks like it should be pretty much on par with the year prior. So, I mean, in my mind, at least, because every year, the 9 years I've had the company, every year we've grown in terms of the amount of transactions we do, the total amount of money that we lend out, and even in terms of, how many people we have on staff. And it looks like this year we're going to probably have like 29 will be very on par to 2020 will be very on par to 2019. So, I mean, I'm kind of looking at that as actual growth, because if you take into effect that there's a pandemic going on and that most of the world shut down for 3 months, had it been a normal year, I'm sure that we would have done much better than 2019. So I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, yeah, I agree with you. It has, for a surprise for all of us, it has been a good year in terms of all the situation, globally, what's going on, shutdowns. As people that are watching us right now, probably some of them, they don't know exactly where we're located, but we're in Riviera, Nayarit, and Puerto Vallarta. We share the same bay, so all of our market depends basically on tourism, and when we have all the shutdowns and all the cancellation of flights and everything, all of us were scared, like when this market is going to be recovered, when are we going to start seeing sales, and luckily for us, we started to see a lot of transactions going on the market. One of my theories is that I believe that all this global situation has made people speed up their decisions. Some of them, they were like, oh, we don't know, maybe we're going to buy next year, maybe we're going to wait for the next winter. But with all this situation, they have been speeding up their decision making, and I have seen a very active market in real estate.
Right. I agree. I agree with you and your theory that a lot of people have been like, you only live once, and why are we
Exactly.
going to wait 5 years to do what we want to do? Because we don't know. Like tomorrow is not guaranteed. You know what I've seen? We have quite a few clients who already own property here, and they've owned condominiums, and because of all the restrictions that have been placed on condo living, you know, like they restricted hours in terms of using the pool, the gym, all that kind of stuff. Even some of the condos I know of, they wouldn't even allow you to rent out your units to have, you know, if you had a rental unit. So I've seen we have a decent amount of clients who've actually decided they want to purchase houses. They want to have houses so that they don't have to abide by the rules that a condo association puts on a building.
That's very interesting trend, you know, because you're right. Like I saw same as you. Actually, we were hustling a little bit to show some properties because we were not allowed to get in, only owners. So for us, it was complicated to show some of the properties. But you're right, you know, this trend of people searching more for houses or properties that doesn't depend to an homeowners association probably has been increasing to have more independence to the rules, you know.
Right, I agree. Well, I mean, if I can just change a bit, because just to go back to the original question,
Yes.
it could be, I mean, that person, you know, one of the things they might be asking about also is have the loan conditions changed from COVID? Because that is a question I've been getting a lot, you know, with the pandemic, you know, are the banks tightening up? Are the banks lending less money? Are the banks changing their qualification requirements? In general, it's kind of like a catch, okay, we're a mortgage broker. My CBI, the company that I own, is a mortgage broker, which means we're the go-between between the notary, the lender, and the client and the seller. So the notary, the lender, the buyer, and the seller, we're the one who puts them all together, basically. We have agreements with 10 different banks, all Mexican banks, and of those banks, not all of the banks will lend to foreigners. So we actually kind of divide them into what we call like traditional and non-traditional products. And the non-traditional products are the ones that we've been using for foreigners. Why do I call them non-traditional? Because the way the banks are set up is they're not these huge corporate entities. They really only offer a couple of services, mortgages, saving plans, etc. And they don't offer, again, like credit cards, car loans, personal lines of credit. They don't offer any of that. So because they're smaller banks, they're less bureaucratic, and therefore it's been easier for them to open up to kind of an outside of the box thinking, and therefore we've been able to get them to lend to foreigners. So with all that being said, the non-traditional banks have not changed their policies at all. They have not changed their policies in terms of loan conditions, in terms of interest rates, terms, all that. And they haven't changed their policy. They've changed a bit their policies in terms of qualification, just in the sense that if someone is working directly in an industry, like is a restaurant owner or something like that, can be directly affected by COVID, then they are asking for the client to regularly, throughout the process, update his income documentation. They just want to make sure that, you know, that his business is able to survive, basically. But I've only seen that with one of all the clients we're dealing with. I've only seen that with one client. And then for the more traditional banks, the banks that most of us think about when we think about lending in Mexico, those banks, it's kind of like I've been a catch-22, I feel, for them, in the sense that they're really trying to make sure that they can make their goals. You know, they want to make sure that they can lend the amount of money that they had predicted they would be lending for 2020. But at the same time, they are restricting a bit their qualification requirements, because especially for those people who work in industries that can be affected directly by COVID. Okay. So I've seen that, but I've seen them also be kind of like, for the traditional banks, I've also seen them be kind of, they think outside the box as well. Like we had one client where they just asked them to freeze up 6 months of monthly payments, so this way they can get through, you know, the downturn and stuff like that. But for purposes of today's talk, when we're talking about foreigners, no, I've not seen any changes in terms of policies or any changes in terms of requirements.
Okay, so one of the questions, Josh, that I have, and you already explained, give us a very good explanation of it, is that I like to be very practical with you know, examples we're giving, and so let's put an example of a buyer that is from Canada, from Alberta. He loves Puerto Vallarta, and his income is based in Canada, but he likes very much this area, and he wants to purchase a property here. So a foreigner client can get mortgage to buy properties in Mexico. And the other question is, what are the basic requirements to apply for those mortgage, Josh?
Okay, yeah, well, to answer your first question, a foreigner, so a non-Mexican, can obtain a mortgage to purchase a property in Mexico, anywhere in Mexico. They don't have to have any ties to Mexico. So they don't have to have residency in Mexico. They don't have to have employment, credit, any of that in Mexico. We use 100% of their documentation from their country. So usually it's Canada, usually it's the United States and Canada. So their employment is in the United States. Their bank statements is in the United States. Their credit report is in the United States. They don't have anything to do with Mexico. Those clients, that's our specialty. That's what we deal with the majority of our clients. Okay. I forgot your second part of the question. Sorry.
Yeah, the requirements, because also we work with cross-border investment a lot. So normally you give us a punch list of documents you need to require from our clients in order to apply for the basic loans. So what are the basic requirements for these mortgages, Josh?
Sure. The biggest requirement is that the client has the money available, the cash available that he has to come up with. Okay. So the lowest down payment requirement for a foreigner is 30% of the purchase price. Okay. So, but aside from the purchase price, they have to have their closing costs available. And as we know, those of us who work with foreigners, closing costs in Mexico are higher than what a client is used to in Canada and the United States. In my experience, usually when a realtor is talking to a client about a cash transaction, they'll tell the client that his closing costs are between 4 to 6%, somewhere around there. With a mortgage transaction, they're closer to 8 to 10% in terms of total closing costs. The additional closing costs, you still have to pay, your trust fee, your escrow fee. You have to pay your due diligence, the notary fee. That is included in the 8 to 10%. The difference from the 4 to 6 on a cash transaction to 8 to 10 on a mortgage transaction corresponds to the commissions that are involved in order to obtain the mortgage. So basically the commission for the lender and the commission for the broker. Okay. So the client needs to have, I just explained closing costs, which wasn't your question, but I'm getting to your question. So the client has to have the 30% down payment, and then he has to have 10% in closing costs. So that's 40% of the purchase price the client needs to have in cash. So that's always where I start with the client, because a lot of foreigners are used to borrowing 90%, only needing 10%, and the closing costs in the States being $5,000. Okay, so when they all of a sudden hear 40%, it could be that they're not even close to prepared yet. Okay, so that's the biggest requirement. And that's generally where I always start. And those of you who are listening to us who are realtors, that's also a tip you can use to talk to your clients. Do you have 40% of the purchase price available? Okay. Another huge requirement is if the client is borrowing over approx $170,000, the client will have to do medical testing to qualify for life insurance. Life insurance in Mexico is required on pretty much every financial product. When the mortgage amount is under $170,000, the client just fills out a questionnaire and just talks about his health history. If the mortgage amount is over $170,000, the client's going to have to actually do urine, blood, and an EKG. So where I'm going with that is the client has to be healthy enough in order to qualify for life insurance if his loan amount is over $170,000. Okay, those to me are the two biggest requirements. The client, of course, has to document income. The client has to document that he has income to pay back the mortgage, but he really only needs to document that he has the amount of money coming into a bank account that corresponds to the mortgage amount plus his other debts. So what that means is, let's say the client's coming from Los Angeles. And let's say in Los Angeles, between his mortgage, his credit card payment, his car payment, let's say he's paying $5,000 a month. Okay. And then let's say the mortgage here in Mexico is going to be in pesos, but let's say in dollars, it's going to be $2,000 a month. So that means he's going to have total payments of $7,000, correct? So that means that between the borrowers in their bank statement, they're going to have minimum deposits of $7,000 a month over a 3-month period. Okay. So that's basically, it's like a 1-to-1 ratio is what we would call it. So it's very, very lax, because usually in the States, usually in the States and Mexico with most traditional banks, you'd have to be documenting like 2.5 to 3 times of your debt payments in income. Just because it makes sense that you're not spending 100% of your income on debt payments. You know, your income also goes towards other expenses. So those are the biggest, the client has the money, the 40% available, the client is healthy enough for life insurance, and that the client has income documentation, which can be bank statements, that shows that he can cover his current debts, plus the debt from the mortgage.
Okay, perfect. That's very clear. Yeah, that's important, because normally they clients, they think like they can lend them 90%, 80% of the total purchase price, and they don't have on their heads those extra costs or closing fees. As you mentioned, and people that are watching us today, closing fees in Mexico probably are a little bit higher than the States and Canada. But also we have another advantages, such as the property tax.
Mm-hmm.
Property tax in Mexico is very low comparing to US or Canada. So in some things we're a little bit higher. In some other we're completely lower than Canada and the States.
Right.
So
yeah, I also say I often explain it that in Mexico, I mean, I always say to my clients when we start working together that you have to have an open mind. You can't expect everything to be a mirror of what you're used to in the States and Canada. I mean, part of the reason why they're buying in a foreign country is because they like, something being some of the differences that we have here in Mexico. So what Nacho was saying, I agree with that. Basically the way I look at it is, in Mexico, you pay lots of money up front to get into the property, but then to maintain the property, it's very inexpensive to hold on to property in Mexico. So it's just a different system. Like in the States, they make it very easy and inexpensive to obtain property. But if you do the numbers, if you hold on to a property for 5 or 6 years in the United States versus Mexico, it's including the closing costs and property tax, it's most likely going to be considerably more expensive in the United States because of your annual property tax.
Yes. One question that I don't have this one right off, but it just came to my head, Josh, because it's very common. It's sometimes our clients, they ask us like, okay, I'm going to get a mortgage in Mexico, but my property in Canada or in the US is going to be a guarantee for that mortgage, or the property that I'm buying. Can you give more explanation about this to the clients?
Yeah. I mean, the mortgages we deal with are legally set up just like what they'd be used to in the States. The property here in Mexico is the guarantee for the lender, and the lender puts a lien on the property. Okay, so it's just like it's set up in the States. There's no, we don't use their assets in the States. We don't use, assets, liquid or hard assets. So their property in the States, is not tied to the mortgage in Mexico whatsoever. The property here, the property in Mexico, is what is the collateral for the bank.
Other thing, Josh, that I always, it's hard for us to understand, because the mortgage rates, interest rates are higher in Mexico. But with this, comparing to the US or Canada, of course, could you give us a little bit examples of what are average on Canada and United States for mortgage interest rates, and in Mexico, and the product you're offering for foreigners, what exchange rate they have approximately?
Sure. I mean, to be honest, I can't speak too much. My company only does mortgages in Mexico. So, I mean, I can't speak too much to what the interest rates currently are in the United States and Canada. But I would imagine they're probably somewhere around like 4 to 5% in Canada, and maybe like 5 to 6% in the United States. The mortgage rates that we're dealing with here in Mexico are actually, the ones that we deal with for foreigners are actually extremely low. The interest rates we're dealing with are generally between 2.4 to 3.6%.
Wow.
Yeah, so the interest rates we deal with are quite lower. There is something to keep in mind, because a lot of people will, here in Mexico, part of your monthly payment will include principal, interest, and will also include life insurance and property insurance. Okay, so we talked about how life insurance was a requirement. That's something that is not a requirement in the States. So that's something that some people see as an additional fee, but of course it provides a product. I mean, The life insurance would cover the mortgage amount in case the owner of the property were to die while the mortgage was outstanding. And his beneficiary would inherit the property mortgage-free. It pays off the mortgage amount. It actually gives the person as well a cash bonus if someone dies, because the amount that's insured is actually slightly higher than the original mortgage amount. So that's part of the monthly payment. And then also part of the monthly payment is property insurance. So a lot of clients kind of assume that the mortgages here are much more expensive than they are in the United States because of those two insurances. I agree that insurance and life insurance is different in Mexico because it's required here, and in the States it's not required. But property insurance in the States is required. The big difference is usually the property insurance is paid once a year and not via the mortgage payment. So clients are still paying it, but they're just paying it a different method. And here they just come down and they see it as part of the monthly payment, and they think that the monthly payment's a lot higher. But in the end, it's a fee that's just being divided by 12 months instead of paying it once.
Yeah, that's why people that are watching us today, it's very important to approach with experts, like cross-border investment with Josh. They're very professionals, and they will always give you the best alternatives and best options, because sometimes, people that are not very related with mortgage, Josh, it's very common that if they see that their payment is going to be low, that's the best options for them. And they're not seeing all those accessories that are like insurance and extra costs that maybe in another product, probably you're going to pay more monthly, but you're going to pay less interest or less fees for insurance, life insurance, etc. And at the end, probably that product will be less expensive than the first one you thought it was going to be a better option.
Exactly.
You're the ones that specialize in mortgages, and you're the one that analyze and give the clients the best alternatives regarding their situation, regarding their income or profession.
Exactly. Now that you just touched on that topic, I just want to kind of expand on that a little bit if I can.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Okay. As you can tell, I talk a lot. The way that we run, how my company works is quite a bit different than a mortgage broker would be in the United States. We do the entire transaction. So, like for example, if a client contacts us via our website, or if, we're lucky that a realtor like Ignacio presents us with the client, that's our first contact with the client. And then what we do is there's people in my office, and this is where I'm involved quite a bit when it comes to the process with the clients, is we'll talk to the client about the loan conditions. One of the very first things we do is we say to the client, okay, you're just getting your feet wet, you're just starting the process, but do you have a purchase price range? And with that number, we can send out the client an estimate of the closing costs and the loan conditions. So this way, from the very beginning, the client can start looking at and getting used to how things work in Mexico. At the same time, we'll start working on his qualifications, making sure the client has, the things that we discussed prior to be able to move forward with this loan package. Then once he's actually submitted to that same department, so those same people will submit to a lender and get the approval. And then once he's approved, the file is turned over to one of our in-house attorneys, and our attorneys will do the legal closing process. So if the realtor wants us, we'll assist in the sales contract, we'll assist with opening escrow. Because these transactions are with foreigners, we'll originate the trust. We'll do the due diligence on the property, so the certificates of no liens. We'll order the commercial appraisal, the tax appraisal. We actually write the deed, put the deed together, and then we of course do the funding and the closing of the mortgage as well. So where I'm going is, at CBI, we work with our clients from the first time they contact us throughout the entire process of sales contract, obtaining the mortgage approval, closing on the property, and obviously beyond. I mean, after the closing of the property, questions come up. Clients want to pay off part of their mortgage, or clients have troubles making their monthly payment, what have you. We're always involved in that as well. So I just found that method was kind of needed because it was years ago when we only used to do the approval, like what you would be used to in the States. In the States, a mortgage broker generally will get you an approval and then pass the file off to a closing attorney. I found that when we did that kind of process here, so many things would get lost between the cracks. And because our transactions are complicated, there's very few people who do what we do for a living. Mortgages for foreigners. There's very few of us. So because there's such complicated transactions, I found that it was necessary for us who have the expertise to be involved in the transaction in all steps.
Yes. Josh, where's your office located? One of the questions was that exactly what services does CBI offer to clients? You already answered very clear. Where you're located, where can people reach you if they want some information of mortgages? Please give that information, Josh.
So we have two offices in Vallarta. The principal office, which is where everyone else is, because I'm is by the stadium. For those who don't know, so by the Sheraton or the stadium. So you can go into our website. Maybe our website, I can see it's right there. It's crossborderinvestment.com. And if you go into the contact page, there'll be like a little map, and it'll show you where that office is. I do ask, just because of the contingency, that we are asking clients to make appointments, because we just don't want to have the office full of people for obvious reasons. And then we have a small office, which is where I'm today, which is in the right in the middle of the romantic zone of Puerto Vallarta. And this office really is just because a lot of our clients are in this neighborhood. So this way clients have a little bit more access. The other office is only about 10 minutes away, but a lot of clients don't really want to have to drive 10 minutes, what can I say? So we have those offices, but the best way, even before the contingency, the best way I find to contact us is via our website. A big difference between, like, when a foreigner comes down here, they usually, in their property shopping, they usually want to spend time with the real estate agent, so like Nacho in this case, and they want to spend time at the beach. But they really don't want to spend that much time with us, because what we do is kind of the, lack of a better term, it's like the boring side of the transaction. You know, we're dealing with numbers, and we're dealing with documents and signatures and formats. So generally, I mean, of course, clients are 100% welcome to meet with us, and we encourage it when they're in Vallarta. But we also don't get offended when a client says they don't want to.
One important thing about CBI services for the people that are watching us today is that they not, and Josh mentioned that before, they not only give mortgages, you know, in this area of Puerto Vallarta and Riviera, Nayarit. They are open to other destinies. Josh, sometimes I talk to him and he's in Playa del Carmen, or he's saying that he's working. I don't know if that's true, but he's in Cancun, Playa del Carmen. And I remember when I forwarded you a client of mine that he was going to buy in Mexico City, and Eduardo, he bought there. And he told me it was very funny because at the closing, someone mentioned, like, where this person came from. He's from Puerto Vallarta, but he's a mortgage broker and he's closing a deal in Mexico City. Like, they didn't understand that where this person came from, you know. And it's very good, and I'm happy for you, Josh, that you have been open different markets in different destinies.
Yeah, I would actually say right now that, I mean, I'll do numbers when 2020 closes, but I'm assuming that we do probably about like half of our transactions in Vallarta, like 50% of our or maybe 60% of our closings in Vallarta, and the other transactions spread out throughout Mexico, mostly like San Miguel de Allende, Los Cabos, Playa del Carmen, and this year we're doing quite a few in Hualtuco.
Another question that we have, actually, I don't know if there's some live questions right now. If there's someone writes down some questions, well, there's one there. Lulu is saying that it's in Spanish. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Do you want me to translate it?
Yeah, please.
Okay. What are the costs to work on a mortgage for our clients, and what does that depend on? I'm assuming she's referring to the commission that the client would pay. The commission would pay a client. It's a percentage based on his loan amount, and it would depend on the specific lender as well. So it's, I mean, I'm not trying to escape the question, but it varies. So it varies depending on the bank and depending on the specific loan amount. But it's usually that's the difference based. Remember how we're talking about closing costs are between 4 to 6% for a cash transaction, and then a mortgage is between 8 to 10%. So we're looking at like 2 to 4% more for a mortgage transaction, and that's specifically for the commissions. And just to be very clear, sorry, Nacho, just to be very clear, a client doesn't pay anything until he's actually being submitted to a lender. So the entire process, all the ping pong, all the back and forth about explaining the loan conditions, explaining the processes, all of that, even getting together a complete loan package, there's absolutely no fees involved for that. It's just when a client pulls the trigger and says, I want to get a loan approval from a bank, is when the client actually pays. He pays $525 to submit to the lender, and then he would pay commissions once he's actually approved and moving through the closing process. But to talk to us, for us to qualify you and all of that, there's absolutely no fees involved with that. And we actually only encourage clients to actually get an approval from a bank if the client's confident that he's going to use his mortgage. It doesn't make that much sense for a client to actually get a loan approval if he's just seeing what's out there. We as a mortgage broker, we know our bank's guidelines inside and out. So, if a client just kind of wants to have an idea for what he could qualify for, that's something that my office can do. The client can send in his tax returns, bank statements, and credit report. And within 48 hours, we can say, hey, client, you should be able to qualify for this amount. And then from there, it's up to the client to know how ready he is to move forward. If the client's going to say, okay, CBI says that I should be able to get a $250,000 mortgage, which is the amount that I was looking for. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working with Nacho to find the property. So if that's the case, then what I would say to the client is, okay, if you're going to actively look for property with the intention of getting into a sales contract, I would say to the client, yeah, now's the time to submit and get you an approval. So this way, when you find that property, you've already worked your way through part of the process. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, that's true, and that's something that it's part of our work to do the discovery, because sometimes you're doing tours to buyers, and suddenly they find this beautiful house and they say, yeah, well, this is the house we're looking for. Okay, how are you going to pay for it? Oh, we're going to check for a loan, or we're going to check for a mortgage, or we need to sell a property in the US or Canada to buy, and they're not ready at that moment. So we start the same way as you guys. We start the other way around. We say, you know what? First, you need to, if you're gonna use a mortgage, you need to be qualified to see how much they lend you, and regarding that amount, we can help you out, and we can show you what it's available in the properties that you're searching.
Well, that's it. What we would do in that case, Nacho, is my company would pre-qualify the client. Okay. And then once the client, comes down here and actively looks for properties, that's when we actually submit him to the lender. Because a few things can happen. I mean, one thing is the loan approval could expire. Like, let's say that someone, let's say we submitted someone in November, but they're not coming down until March. I mean, by March, for the lender, their loan will have expired. So if we say, hey, client, everything looks good now in November, you're going to come down and work with Nacho and see properties in March. Then in February, let's actually submit you to the lender. So this way, when you're looking for properties with Nacho, your mortgage is valid. It's not expired. Okay, that's what we would do. And as you probably know, I mean, a lot of clients will pre-qualify them, and then they won't qualify. They don't have the health, or they don't have the money available. The 40% that we were talking about before, they don't have that money available. So then they either have to lower their budget and have the purchase price and have the purchase price meet what their budget is, or they're not going to have to buy. They're not going to be able to buy. So sometimes, I mean, that can happen as well, right? Is that we're sending client the information, they realize they don't have the cash available, and they're not willing to lower their budget. So, we are a tool for realtors as well to kind of help filter out some of your clients to see how serious or how prepared they are.
Okay, Josh, now you already explained us how this process, go through, how what CBI takes care since the beginning to the end of the whole process. I don't know if you already talked about the time that will take a transaction to close, since the beginning when you start on the process up to the closing at the notary. What is the time frame? Can you give us some information about that, Josh, please?
Sure. Before I can answer that, I did see a question pop up. I don't know if you saw it on your screen. That was asking about the fideicomiso.
Oh, I didn't saw that one.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
You want me to answer the question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Josh. How does the trust affect a mortgage in Mexico, right?
How does a trust affect a mortgage in Mexico? Well, the same way it affects a cash transaction, basically. I mean, as as most of us know, when a non-Mexican purchases a property within the restricted zone in Mexico, which refers to 100 kilometers from the border or 50 kilometers from the shore, the non-Mexican has to purchase the property via a trust. Okay, so when there's a mortgage involved, it's the exact same entity. It's the exact same figure. The trust bank is the legal owner of the property. The lender puts a lien on the property, and the person paying for the property is the beneficiary of the trust. So there's really no difference in the figure of the trust if it's a cash transaction or a mortgage transaction.
Okay, I think that's clear for the person that asked us. And there's another one that says when a foreigner has a permanent resident, if he could apply from here to a mortgage.
It depends. Sorry?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. The way I kind of interpret that question is if the client, I don't really know. Do you know what that question means?
If they have a permanent resident here, if they can apply for a credit, for a mortgage. I'm pretty sure that yes, because they have a permanent resident, but I believe that their income is based in the U.S. or Canada.
Well, yeah, I think that the person who asked the question might be a little bit confused because, like I mentioned before, all the banks that we work with are Mexican banks. So if she's asking if someone with permanent residency can apply with Mexico or with a foreign, for us there's no difference because all the banks are Mexican that we deal with. So if someone has permanent residence, I mean, the biggest thing for the bank, for all banks in Mexico, is not really the nationality of the client. The biggest thing is where the client documents his income and credit. Okay, so usually if someone's going to have permanent residency, not always, of course, but usually it's because they're living and working in Mexico. Okay, it could be that it's someone who's owned property for many, many years and went through temporary and now is permanent as well. But usually, I'm assuming most cases of permanent residency would be because they live and work in Mexico. And so if that's going to be the case, then they have the options that are available for foreigners, as well as the more traditional options that we're talking about as well. I don't know if that answered the question, but I tried.
Yes, I think I agree with you. I think it doesn't matter if, as you mentioned, the important thing here is that the income is where the income is based, in order to provide the mortgage, the product you offer. And going back a little bit to the other question, Josh.
The time frame, right?
Yeah, the time frame. That's important because normally, probably some of the buyers, they think they're going to close fast, but it takes a while to do the transaction and close the deal, since we start the mortgage process up to the closing.
Yeah, so let me talk to you a bit about it. We basically divided the divider transaction, for the easiest way to explain it, we kind of divided it into like 3 phases. The first phase would be the approval. Okay, so from once we have a complete loan package until we can submit to a lender and get an approval from the bank. Okay, and that the time frame that corresponds to that will depend heavily on the client, because there's not much we can do if we don't have the documentation. Okay, so we would request the documents from the client: tax returns, bank statements, credit report, identifications, and then it's up to the client how quickly they get it to us. Once we have a complete loan package and we're ready to submit to the lender, it'll take about 2 to 3 weeks to actually have an approval. And then once we have an approval, as soon as the client already has a property, then in a signed sales contract, then we would order the appraisal. It takes about 2 weeks for us to be able to receive the appraisal. And then once we receive the appraisal, then we start doing the origination of the trust and the due diligence on the property and all that other kind of stuff. Okay, so the closing process, what we think of as the traditional closing process, the trust and the due diligence of the property, we only start that once we actually have the appraisal. Okay, so it usually takes about a month to get to that point, to when we have that appraisal. Of course, we can quicken that by about 2 weeks if the client already has an approval prior to entering into a sales contract, okay? Because that would mean that if the client already has an approval, he would sign a sales contract, and the next day we would be ordering the appraisal. We'd have the appraisal 2 weeks later, and then we would start due diligence on the property, okay? And then the due diligence on the property, that's like the notary processes. So that could take around like 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the time of the year and whatever comes.
Or more. Right now, it's taking forever.
Of course, it really is. So what happens is some of our we have certain lenders that will allow us to close as soon as we're ready with the notary. So what that means is it'll probably be like a 2 to 3 month closing, okay, from the very beginning to the closing. We have other lenders that require a grace period. They require, even if we're ready to go with all aspects of the closing, they require at least 3 months from when the appraisal is received until we can actually close, as a minimum 3 months, sometimes 4 months, okay? So what that means is if you add on that month prior that corresponds to the approval and the appraisal, that's like a five-month closing, okay? So it depends. I mean, it depends on the desires of the buyer. Because like I mentioned, we have lenders that have absolutely no grace period. So if a client comes to us and says, I really want this property, but the seller's not going to wait the 4 to 5 months that some of your loan products require, then we'd say, okay, easy answer. You go for the loan products that don't require the 4 to 5 months. What happens is some of the clients like the financial conditions that correspond to some of those products that take longer to close. So at that point, that's where the buyer has to weigh his priorities. Do I want to get into this property that's requiring me to close quickly, or do I want to have the better financial conditions that I think are better for my situation and find the property that allows me to close in 4 to 5 months?
Okay.
So I mean, that's what we do. We present it to the client, and the client makes his decision.
Of course. So for example, if there's like a building that is like 3 or 4 months up to be delivered and the condominium regime to be ready, could you apply for this 3-4 month mortgage and be ready to close once the building is already finished? Could be an option, or it has to be a property that is already finished?
It has to be a property that's already finished, because we can't remember that like the 3 month grace period starts when we actually receive the appraisal. Okay. And we can't, as you know, Nacho, but maybe some of our viewers don't, you can't receive an appraisal without other legal documents on the property.
Correct. Okay. Other question that people were asking us, and we of course thank all of the followers and clients and CBI clients also that are watching this show today. If there's a limit on the price of the property to get a mortgage, like if you can get a $1 million mortgage, $2 million mortgage, it's open, or there's a limit regarding your experience?
Yeah, there is a limit. First of all, let me just, not to be technical, but I mean, there's no limit on the purchase price. There's no limit on what there is a limit on is the mortgage amount. Okay, so the largest mortgage amount that we're able to obtain right now is, I think it's like $1.25 million. So, of course, a client can buy a $4 million home and only mortgage 1.25, right? You just have to have 2.75 out of pocket. So there's no limit on the purchase price, but there are limits on the mortgage amount, and it's around $1.25 million.
Okay, yeah, because sometimes as well, we have worked with some clients that they're looking for high-end properties, and they have to know in advance that they cannot get all the money from the mortgage. They have to be like you mentioned, 30-40% at the most.
Yeah.
So
30-40% down. I mean, a client can, a client, if they're doing 1.25, they would have to put down 40%.
Correct. Okay, Josh. Basically, those are the questions we have. Here is your headquarters. It's in Brasilia 400, second floor, 5 de Diciembre. 5 de Diciembre is close to downtown in PB. You can find Josh as well in webpage, emails. We are very grateful, Josh, to have you here today. we always work with CBI as a sales partner because you help us to get the money, and we help you find the right property. So
find the client.
find the client, of course, yeah. So that's
no. Thank you very much to you, Nacho, and to your whole team for giving us the opportunity to present with you today. And hopefully hopefully for some of the audience today, this will give them the information they need to make a decision about moving forward.
Yeah, the idea of these live talk shows is to give handy information to our clients and buyers, so they can understand a little bit about buying properties here in Mexico and in this area that we're located in the Puerto Vallarta and Riviera, Nayarit. Remember as well to follow us at Instagram, Facebook, our webpage, greenrealty.com. We're going to talk next Thursday about a very good program about vacational rental properties and property management. We're going to bring this property that is You Home. They're specialized in short-term rentals and property management. So hope you can join us, connect at YouTube or Facebook, Josh, because I know that you have some investment properties as well.
Always a salesman, Nacho.
Yeah, of course. And we follow you, Josh. Many of you don't know Josh. He's a very professional person on the mortgage, but he's a professional runner as well. So we follow up.
No one pays me for running. I'm not professional yet.
You do it for pleasure, but it's good. It's good to see you in all those races. Very good, Josh.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
So thank you all for following us today, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. See you next Thursday at 11 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, Josh.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.